Hunger forced people to create what the world was never meant to see. When food disappears, rules dissolve. In every war, occupation and famine, there have been recipes not written in cookbooks, but whispered in the dark. Recipes that broke laws, defied occupiers, and saved lives. The forbidden recipe wasn't about taste. It was about survival, courage, and resourcefulness. Across Europe during World War II, and even in prisoner camps and sieges like Leningrad or Warsaw, people found ways to feed entire families and neighbours in silence, using scraps, substitutes, and ingenuity that would shame modern waste. This is the story of how one of those recipes, a blend of desperation and brilliance, kept dozens alive without a sound. It's also a lesson in what happens when human beings refuse to die quietly, even when every grain of flour was forbidden. During the German occupation of Eastern Europe and parts of France, food control was, one of the most powerful weapons. Occupiers seized farms, rationed wheat and meat, and made it illegal for civilians to store or share more than a fixed amount. The black market was dangerous, and even being caught with too much flour or sugar could mean arrest or, execution. So people turned inward, literally. They began grinding tree bark for cellulose flour, boiling potato peels for starch, and fermenting weeds and wild greens to replace protein. But one of the most remarkable adaptations came from resistance groups and hidden families. A silent bread that could be made overnight without smoke, smell, or the clatter of pots. The forbidden recipe that sustained them under the noses of patrols. The base of this mixture was usually fermented pulp. Mashed root vegetables, often beets, carrots, or even turnips, mixed with a small amount of ground grain, if available. Fermentation replaced the need for yeast, creating a nutrient-dense, slightly sour dough that could be cooked quietly on heated stones, buried coals, or the back of a warm stove. The lack of scent was deliberate, In ghettos and camps, the smell of bread could draw soldiers within minutes. For those living under occupation, cooking became a matter of stealth. In Warsaw, Krakow, and even the forests of Belarus, partisans and hidden families developed quiet methods of preparing food. The forbidden recipe was always made after nightfall. Women mashed vegetables with wooden spoons, wrapped in cloth to silence the sound. Fires were replaced by smouldering embers, and bread was flattened into thin cakes, small enough to cook fast but dense enough to sustain. Historical accounts from Polish resistance archives mention one version that combined grated potato, ground acorn flour, and beet syrup. The mixture fermented naturally within 6 hours. Once thickened, it was pressed between hot tiles or flat stones preheated near a hidden fire. The resulting bread was dark, slightly sweet, and full of energy, a meal that could feed an adult for half a day. For many, this became the only form of sustenance during hiding. One family in eastern Poland reportedly kept 17 people alive for 3 weeks with a single pot of this mixture, prepared nightly in silence. Every component had a purpose beyond taste. Acorns were abundant and invisible to soldiers who ignored them as forest debris. When ground and soaked, acorns lost most of their bitterness and became a substitute for flour. Potato starch gave structure and kept the mixture from crumbling. Beet syrup or molasses, often stolen from agricultural stock, added calories and sweetness without needing sugar. The most important part was fermentation, a process that, relied on naturally occurring bacteria to pre-digest the mix, enhancing its nutritional content. In the absence of yeast or ovens, fermentation made food more efficient and digestible. In modern terms, this was survival biochemistry at work. The same principles that make sourdough powerful today were used unknowingly by people simply trying to stay alive. To replicate a version of this today for educational or survival training purposes, you'd use 3 parts grated root vegetables, beets, carrots or potatoes, 1 part ground acorns, oats or coarse whole grain, and enough warm water to make a thick paste. Oh, and optionally you could add a spoon of molasses or honey for a bit of extra energy. Seal the mixture in a container overnight to let it ferment. Then cook small patties on a skillet, flat rock or pan without oil. Just heat, really. The result is a dense, earthy cake packed with energy. It's, the modern echo of what history called forbidden. Similar survival foods appeared wherever starvation ruled. In the Netherlands, people created what they called tulip bread, using ground tulip bulbs. In Norway and Finland, families mixed pine bark flour with lichen paste. And across Asia, especially in Japanese internment camps, rice water and bean paste were used to create, stealth food that could be eaten cold and stored long-term. Each region's version reflected what nature offered, and honestly, what war took away. But the essence remained the same: silent, smokeless nourishment that needed no luxury ingredients and no visibility. It's said that in the Warsaw Ghetto, a mother once told her children that this forbidden dough was the bread of the brave, because every bite risked death if discovered. And yet she continued to make it, night after night, not because it tasted good, no. Peter Peas is het dit is vast niet zo. Het is zo zijn temna en and massa. Treasure. Beyond its historical value, this recipe teaches an essential principle of survival. Food security depends more on knowledge than on supply. The people who lived through famine, siege and captivity didn't survive because they had stores of food. They survived because they understood transformation. For modern gardeners, preppers, or, anyone practicing self-reliance, the lesson is simple but honestly quite profound. Learn how to process inedible plants into safe nutrition. Understand how fermentation amplifies calories and preserves resources. And, experiment with root-based or nut-based starches as alternatives to flour. The forbidden recipe isn't just about the past. It's a framework for enduring any crisis. If you were to apply this today, you could run a simple test in your kitchen or camp. Try fermenting root vegetables for 12 hours, then cook them into cakes as described. You'll notice not just how filling they are, but how they require almost no energy or resources to make. exactly what those in hiding depended on. The forbidden recipe is more than an artifact of wartime hunger. It's a record of defiance and adaptation. It fed the silenced, the hidden, and the hunted. It's a reminder that even when food was outlawed, life refused to yield. If this kind of history speaks to you, the kind told not by generals but by survivors, make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Valor for more deep dives into forgotten resilience and innovation. Share this story with anyone who believes human will end where hunger begins. Because as history has shown, sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is a meal cooked in silence.